All right, guys, we're back in the action. Plenty of time this afternoon for lunch and free time. Free time is a great time for talk time. Go grab a walking partner and go hike around and have some follow-up conversations. But now we get to hear a little bit more of the journey. We had a snapshot of the fingerprints of the work that God has been doing, and now we get to dig in just a little bit deeper. So, John, team, take it away.
Yeah, so I'm delighted to, you get me again, by the way, but I'm delighted to be with my teammates and David, and we're going to hear from our chairman of our investment committee here and the chairman of our board in a minute. We're going to introduce those folks here shortly. But this is really a build on what we just heard, quite honestly. This is just a category of the opportunities that are out there. And whenever I sit down with someone who might be a potential investor, I never start with Talanton. I start with, what do you value? Because if they don't value mid-size companies in Africa and kind of what we're doing, it's I say praise God that you're doing what God has called you to do. And that, David and I know that very well. That happens frequently. But we praise God for the 110 plus investors we have now, many of whom are in the room. So this is really meant to be a story of our journey a little bit. It's not just going to be a technical over. We're going to get into fund performance and some of that. But we wanted to share a little bit of lessons learned, evolution in our thinking, mistakes. So we want to be transparent. And, we've already talked about this, so I won't park here. But David and I open every time we sit down with an investor with this. And it really is an opportunity to speak about the Word, about Matthew 25, about God, and why we do what we do. And we decided up front to not hide our intentions, but to be very overt that this is what God has called us to do. So way back in 2019, we met at Copper Mountain, Colorado as a partnership group. And David had brought the whole idea that we're going to use Jim Collins' flywheel concept for our strategy. And it actually was a perfect model. And after 2 or 3 days of discussions, a lot of back and forth, what is talent, what it's going to take for us to take this to scale. We're very strategy driven. I was in strategy and mergers and acquisitions in Cargill for about 10 years. The same department that our chairman of our investment committee came out of, Hervé Sarteau. So we speak the same language. So and this, God really just moved, I think. That's how I felt. Like you could almost feel towards the end, the Holy Spirit there saying, if we do these things, if this flywheel starts spinning fast, then we'll start to fulfill the mission of what we desire to do, which is create jobs, bring home, and transform lives. So you can see, starting with building a talented team and partnerships. Number one, we knew that we had to have high quality people. I think when God is in something, He steers talent your way. It's a great way of kind of saying this is of God, because God can put that awesome talent anywhere. And we've been blessed with an incredible, not only investment committee, board, but team, and the high quality deal flow. Obviously, it might seem basic, but it's not as easy as it sounds. And we have been blessed with incredible sourcing partners. This has never been a major issue for us. It seems like right at the right time, we're introduced to more companies, and many of them we could say no fast to, but we were very disciplined in that with our initial screen, by the way. And if they get into deep due diligence, we know that's time, energy, and money. So we're careful about which ones we actually take into that. But we've been blessed with many, I think over 200, right? Yeah, Harry's going to talk about that here in a minute. Triple bottom line, superior returns. We had to meet our financial goals. For our number one impact metric is actually growth of revenue, growth of EBITDA, and health of the balance sheet. And we're not shy about that, because if we don't have that as our number one impact metric, all the other impact metrics don't follow. So that's why we're good, rigorous kind of disciplines with due diligence, investment committee decision-making is critical. And then build investor loyalty and value firming experience. That's what this event is all about. We really strive to do quarterly updates and briefings and newsletters. And we've heard from many of our investors, they love that. They get their financial statement, but they get something way beyond that. Videos, updates on our latest investments, how we're integrating faith and some spiritual breakthroughs. So that's been really fun. And then increasing AUM, obviously. So these are kind of, might seem obvious, but for us, this was our guide. If we do these things well, then we're going to have a high-performing, the very top, a world-class faith-driven and impact investment fund. We were very aware that if you put the word impact in front of investment, this is maybe 5 years ago more than now, praise God, that a lot of people are inherently skeptical. We sat down with a lot of potential investors who said, you really can't do both of those well. And it's really that bifurcation that last panel was talking about that a lot of people have, that it's hard to do both well. And I can say it is hard to do both well. And our investment committee wrestles with that all the time. So I wanted to I'm not going to get into any of the weeds on any of these slides, but I really wanted to start with not us, the partnership group, but the team that God has brought our way. And I can honestly say it's been a bit of a surprise. I'll just share one story. Paul Sherry, really close friend of Harry's, and he came in for the first 2-3 years, no pay, showed up at every meeting. The guy lives in Australia. He was meeting with us at 11 p.m. or 6 in the morning all the time, PhD in chemical engineering? Yeah, something like that. And I thought, okay, what's he going to bring to the table? He has proven invaluable for the type of investing we're doing. We have a handful of investments where he's been one of the key analytical and he's proven to be a really good gifted financial modeler and just an awesome faith-driven voice. Now we're paying him. Harry was a big advocate. We can't just keep having this guy show up. And it's been worth it. So just to give you an idea, plus the Africans, our goal right now, we're on the cusp of hiring a VP in Africa. Our goal has always been to build up an African regional team, and that's still our goal, and we're getting there. It's we're in process on that. But Michelle was just an incredible miracle. She found us on LinkedIn, I think. Yeah, LinkedIn God works somehow through LinkedIn. So, and it's we have 2 hires that way, I think, right? Yeah. So I'll say this: our team is on 4 continents. So God has worked. Talk about a fingerprint of God. We were doing Zoom, SharePoint, Slack long before the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, everyone was pivoting to that. That's what we were doing. And so we didn't really miss a beat on our kind of culture and how we operated. Yeah. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on this because you're going to hear from 5 of our companies this afternoon, but this is a massive story of just the growth in our portfolio. Some of them you see as a repeat because we've done quite a few repeat investments. But David shared already yesterday about how we found long miles through the navigators, and Priska, Harry's been just deeply involved in that. I could just go on about each one of the team members being introduced to these companies, building a relationship, getting it through our very challenging investment committee, and we're on the cusp of a 13th investment that's now on here in the apparel industry, which is actually shifting over to Africa now from Southeast Asia. And good ethical apparel is highly impactful, particularly on young women that otherwise might be in utter poverty. And that's truly the least of these that business is serving. Eyrie was really the champion. I was a skeptic. I had read everything about apparel industry and, the sweatshops and what's the value add they can really bring? Is this really differentiating? And Eyrie was the champion of that one. And now we're on the cusp of getting that done. So that's been super exciting. And everyone likes to see bar charts going like this. And what this is really the story of escalating job creation and impact. So a couple categories we care about immensely: full-time jobs. Part-time jobs in Africa are super important. Those actually are how people move from one job to the next, but how you take care of those people. The construction industry is famous in Nairobi in particular, but across Africa, for not treating people necessarily very well. No benefits, $1 a day at best. What we look for is, do they give them a meal or 2 meals? That means the world to these folks, believe it or not. I heard a story that one of our businesses, I think it was the apparel one, they said all of our employees wanted to work on holidays. And I said, well, why? I mean, it's a paid holiday they're giving them. And they said, because they really want those 2 meals that you're giving them. They otherwise might not eat if they don't come into work. So it just shows the bottom of the pyramid and what they're going through. So this is kind of our historical and projected fund growth. Now, I hope you can see this a little bit, but you can see that right now we're about 21 million of committed capital, and we hope to finish the year about 30 million of committed capital. and 27 million meaning capital deployed. So we'd love to have another 4 to 6 investments done this year. That's the goal. But I praise God for that, because there's been a whole lot of you involved to move that needle upward. So thank you. And, we have over 100 investors now, 110. So what we're finding is the investors are starting to get bigger. When we were at 5 million of AUM, nobody wants to be 15, 20, 30, or 40% of a fund on their own. I mean, a lot of people don't want to do that. So now, we're talking to a lot of institutional investors. The Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative is CIIC. I highly recommend. They have a great website. They have a whole team. There's over 40 members. They have hundreds of millions in endowments and pensions. Many of them are ahead of the Protestants. Truly, they were one of the front runners in socially responsible investing, and they are very, very committed to putting all of their capital in alignment with their values. And so we're one of them. The Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace in New Jersey is deep into due diligence on us right now. And a lot of them have a minimum of, say, 2 to 4 million or 3 million, 5 million, because of all the work it takes to do due diligence to get a new fund. They don't want to start with 500,000. So just pray that those get done. We still treasure the hundreds and 200,000s that have fed us to date, and the 500,000. So those are still valuable for us. So this is an interesting slide. The blue line has been our quarterly returns. And I'm happy to say that 8 out of the 10 last quarters, we've been in the positive category. And the whole time the S&P 500 was volatile last year, we held steady. I mean, we're mainly a debt fund, so it's not super surprising. But there's no guarantee in any of these loans we're making. We have a few that are really struggling. The rest of our portfolio is making up for a couple of challenges. So, and that's the beauty of a portfolio, or kind of this approach of a fund. But this has been, particularly last year, a really interesting selling point for Talanton. We never envisioned getting positive returns so soon. We're in the middle of the early part of a J curve. A lot of our investments are still putting the money to work. And during COVID, a lot of them got really prolonged because of the shipping delays with stuff they were bringing in for plant equipment, new processing equipment, and everything got a little bit challenged, but we stayed in the positive category. So if you want stability in an alternative, we're getting more and more discussions around the alternative category as a fund, which is really great. More than just an opportunity for charitable capital, which has been our bread and butter. We knew from the beginning of Talanton that we needed world-class partners, and Harry's really going to dig deep into this and a little bit, so I'm not going to park here. But some of these have been just invaluable, and we really went out of our way to partner with recognized names, some of them in Africa that you might not recognize, but these are some of the best with law firms. I want to call it Covington, because we called out Fragri Drinker yesterday. We have a couple folks in the room, Bill Wichterman in particular, his wife Dana, and they have given us pro bono legal support throughout our portfolio in Africa. On the Africa side of one of the most respected law firms in the world. So again, it's just one of those fingerprints of God moments. I'll call out Partners in Food Solutions. It's a secular organization run by a Christian friend of mine. The partners are Cargill, Bueller, one of the big manufacturers of processing equipment in Switzerland. Cargill is really big. I'm just naming a few of them. And they provide some of their top talent. We had the brand manager for all of Europe for General Mills on a Masaka Creamery rebranding project. And John and Esther can share the story. They have a whole new brand they're launching later this year. It wasn't some cottagey, small kind of decision in Rwanda. They had a team of 7 or 8, including design experts from some of the leading thinkers in Europe. So these are the kind of organizations that we're finding available to help us perform well in our portfolio. It's been very exciting. So on the post-investment side, I shared a little bit about this earlier, so I won't park on it now. We've tried things, and we're deeply thankful for Ardent. KeHE in particular is a company that is, over $5 billion in sales? Did they get there? Somewhere around it. Yeah, whatever, 5 or 6 billion. Yeah, and they have a faith-driven founder. and it's a big company, 15,000 employees. They have a leadership development program completely based on Christian principles, but they took out Scripture intentionally because they're a big company. So they really wanted to have Christian values, faith-driven values, and bring everybody in, their Muslim staff, their Hindu staff, into this leadership development program that had a biblical worldview. And it's really about self-care and caring for the folks around you. And we had about 18, 20 of our CEOs and next levels go through the program last summer. They gave us their 2 top trainers. And it was really exciting. It was a one-off because once that was done, there's no sense repeating it again until we have another cohort. But that's the kind of thing we try and look for and bring to bear on our portfolio. And you'll hear from some of the folks today how much that meant to them. They all said we've had lots of leadership training. It's often focused on, growth, revenue, something to do specifically with managing the business. This was a unique program. It was about loving your suppliers. It's about it's okay to take care of yourself as an entrepreneur. And there was a lot of focus on that. And all of our entrepreneurs in our portfolio needed to hear that. So it was a wonderful program. So post-investment support, I would say we're still learning. I would say I would give us maybe a B, and we're just learning now that it's really on our shoulders more than our partners to do the deep spiritual formation that we seek across the portfolio. So yeah, a little bit of key learnings, and I just kind of spoke to this, but building a world-class board is aspirational in a lot of these companies. And some of them are frankly too early stage to give a tremendous amount of time to building a world-class board. But we do seek to have governance. Sometimes it's an advisory board. Sometimes, particularly share the story with Taraji, it's Harry and Priska just getting on the phone and praying together, talking through issues. We do have some high-performing boards. Contegra is one. Rod Magnus, many of you know, who will be here this afternoon, has been the chairman. And it is a high-performing, faith-driven board of the highest order. There's care and concern for the CEO. There's industry experts. There's a lot of questions on governance and accountability and a lot of discussion on how do you manage this rapidly scaling business that's now of significant interest to the president of Kenya. And it's so that's a whole new, they tried to be under the radar screen for 3-4 years, but now the board is discussing, well, how do we manage a country that looks at this business and says, this is significant for our populace. And they're already working with 14,000 farmers. And this used to be one of the leading agriculture exports in all of Kenya. And we're investing in, Contegra is revitalizing that. You're going to have the joy of hearing from Brian this afternoon. So I'll hand this over to you. This is a flywheel priority of pipeline development and evolution. So Harry, yeah.
All right. Good morning. I'm really pleased to be here today. I was on 4 continents yesterday. Getting here, it felt like anyway, and I've had all of your flight delays for you, so you won't need to have any of them. You look at this slide, and one thing that you'll notice is that my wife, who wasn't involved in producing it, is the graphical one and amongst us, and so the color scheme I apologize for. Pipeline development is a flywheel priority. People often ask us, are there really companies in Africa that can sustain the size of investment that we're looking for? And the answer to that is a huge yes. Africa is a extraordinarily quickly growing continent, both from a population perspective and from an economic perspective. It has challenges, but there are just huge opportunities there. You'll see here that we've looked at over 230 companies in the last, how many years are we? 5 years, 4 or 5 years. And we started that process on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side of that picture. You see from referrals. Our team has actually quite a deep experience working across Africa. John lived in Tanzania for 5 years. Iris has lived in crazy places, South Sudan, and then across in Ghana. I've spent 10 years now working in Africa. David's been involved for nearly 30 years in things. So we have a big personal network, and we started the sourcing process through that personal network. And as we've become more and more mature as an organisation, that network has expanded and expanded. So we've joined a number of network organisations. So I think of groups you had on the slide there, groups like Synapis, which works really bringing people together, the Transformational Business Network, the Faith-Driven Investor Network. There's a bunch of network organisations that are constantly referring organisations to us. And now we've got a lot more strategic partners, and that's groups like other investors. So we're getting referrals from big and small. We've had a couple of referrals from Acumen. Some of you may have heard them. They're happy to partner with us. We've had referrals from groups like Novastar, one of our investments. We're a co-investor with them, and we'll hear a little bit from Eileen today. So we're starting to get a bigger and bigger group. And in fact, the pipeline sourcing, oftentimes we have to slow it down because the workload that we go through to then screen those companies, do due diligence, and until we get down to our so far 12 invested, soon to be 13. And you'll see, actually, it's a lot of work screening through that process. The forward button must be that one. Again, my brilliant artwork on show here. We start now by doing an initial screen. We actually didn't used to do this. When we first started, we had a massive big checklist, and we tried to go through that for every company. It was an immense amount of work. We pulled that back to actually a really simple one-page, let's go in and take a gut feel on the company. And our goal is to try, as John said, get through a process of getting to a no quickly, which is fair for the companies we're involved in. We've had some situations where we've gone through sort of 9 months of due diligence, which seems like a long time only to say no. That's a lot of work on our team. It's a lot of work on the companies who we're working with as well. So we desperately try and avoid that situation from both perspectives. And we look across those 4 items there: impact. So are they really? We're really focused around job creation. You heard the job. I really love that comment from Greg, who was talking about jobs. That's really a heart of where we are. We look at governance and management and ownership. And one of the things about ownership that Jerry shared with us this morning, I really connected strongly with. We have learned, I think, through our collective experience across working in Africa, that actually working with teams that are locally based, that have strong governance and strong leadership is the best way forward. Far better than us trying to implant something. Finding people who are doing a terrific job and backing them is what we're all about. Is there a market? Have they got a good sort of process around production? And then finally, are they financially investable? Investability doesn't come up as a word when you spell check it, so I may have made it up. And then we go, if we get through that screening process, we go into a deep dive due diligence. And you can see there, we'll do a whole series of scenario analysis. Sometimes we think we get that right, and then the scenario that happens is something that we didn't even imagine. COVID, for example. Priska will tell you that we invested in Educor in early December 2019. It's a fun time to invest in schools, where in March 2020 they were shut for 12 months by the government. So, we didn't put that in a scenario analysis, but we try. And when we're in industries that we don't have a deep experience inside our team, we'll engage third-party due diligence, and we'll likewise do multiple site visits until we get an investment committee package that we'll take to our investment committee, and we go back and forward with the investment committee, who ask us all sorts of great questions. So that's the sort of process of going from that big pipeline down into how do we get down to the companies we invest in. And then the last thing I'll say, and you've already put a couple of these out, John, so I won't dig too much, but a top flywheel priority is to be a world-class fund. To be a world-class fund, you need world-class support. And we knew that right from the start. And I'll pull out a few because you've called out the law firms that have worked with us already. I'll go to the other side of this and talk about fund administration and advisory. When we first set the fund up, I think we had just on $1 million under management. And I went to a bunch of fund administrators and said, hey, we're a fund. we've got $1 million under management. How do you feel like working with us? And the answer was a resounding no from almost everyone. In fact, we're at the moment going through a process of reassessing that. And at 20 million, there is a lot of fund administrators who are still saying you're way too small. We couldn't be bothered. So I see the fact that we managed to convince JTC Group, who have 200 billion in assets under management under advisory administration. They're a listed company in the UK. They're a reasonably high quality organisation. The fact that we managed to convince them to take us on as a client was extraordinary, and that was I don't know whether you mentioned this in your fingerprint of God. Likewise with RSM, 6th largest accounting firm in the world, who took us on to do our audit. That's just an extraordinary provision of God, and is a stepping stone toward us being a world-class fund. And then we've engaged, because we take money in quarterly, as you'll know, we need to do valuations, and so we've engaged a third-party valuations firm called Stout to do that. They were actually referred to us by the auditors, so which is good, because when the auditors argue about our valuations, we can say, well, you guys know the guys we've got doing this. So I just think that those fingerprints of God, as you say, helping to bring world-class organisations into our environment has been tremendously beneficial. So, and of course, working with the world-class legal support as well, we feel very blessed in that. I think I'm going to move forward and hand that over to Iris.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, so Impact Metrics, we are a faith-driven impact investment fund. And that means that our top priority is to answer the question, what truly is our impact? So when we started the journey 5 years ago, we had this vision and mission of lifting people out of poverty, bring hope and transform lives. And we felt job creation would do that for the least of these. And we only had a top-down approach really to distill our metrics, because we didn't have any portfolio companies. And we focused on the number of jobs. That was how we screened for our companies. And as we went on this journey, we started having conversations with our investment committee that went something like this. This company is never going to create thousands of jobs. However, look at the direct link between quality of early childhood education and quality of employment later on in life. I think most of you probably know which one I'm talking about. We also said, this one is never going to create thousands of jobs probably, but it is pioneering this industry in Africa. It is, bringing in new skill sets, new capabilities, and it's actually replacing imports from China. And so when we got to about 8 or 9 portfolio companies, we started to think, why were we having these conversations? And maybe we needed to go back and reevaluate our impact metrics by taking a bottom-up approach. And so we started with our portfolio companies and we said, why did we invest in them, right? And how did they create jobs? And let's reevaluate our metrics this way. And actually, this was an aha moment, I think, for us, when we realized through this thought process that holistic job creation requires an ecosystem of companies. It is more than just a summation of employment that's created by individual companies. And there's a nuance there that we had overlooked. And so as we thought about our portfolio companies and we looked at, the companies in our pipeline, we realized that they mostly fit into one or more of these 4 categories. And this is now the framework that we use for the ecosystem and our impact. The first is job creators, and as you can see, most of our portfolio companies are actually in the job creators category. These are the companies that will increase the number of jobs. They employ hundreds of people. They engage with thousands of smallholder farmers, and they are tremendously impactful. And so number of jobs really is very important. We also have job enablers. Job enablers are those that are increasing access to jobs for the vulnerable and for the disadvantaged, right? And we see this with Taraji Africa, who are working with special needs kids and low-income children, and Masaka Creamery, who are working with women who are hearing impaired and might not be able to get a job otherwise. Then we have job pioneers. Job pioneers are those companies that are pioneering in their industry, replacing imports and often bring in new skill sets and increasing the types of jobs that are being created in Africa. And then finally, we have job enhancers, those who are increasing the performance and ease of doing existing jobs in the missing middle. And so you can see that we actually have portfolio companies in each of these categories. By recognizing that different companies have different roles to play in the ecosystem, we don't just evaluate them through the single lens of, how many jobs does this company create, and it's more nuanced. And so how do we move from that framework to measurement? I'll be honest, I think that we have some work to do here to get really excellent at it. I think we measure some things well. We look for financial, social, and spiritual impact across different stakeholders. As John said, we measure financial strength because financial health is really important for a company's impact. We measure full-time jobs and part-time jobs and regular suppliers and farmers and direct beneficiaries. But we still have a lot of work to do. We're a work in progress in a lot of these areas where we have questions about how do we measure the quality of jobs and how do we measure spiritual impact? And actually, one very key question for us as a fund is, what is our fund impact and what is attributable to our investment? Because we measure the impact of companies and the jobs that they create and we support through our investment. But there is a question about how much of that is attributable to us. And then finally, how do we report this, not just to our investors, but also to the greater impact investment community and really become thought leaders in this space? And so to do that aspirationally, we really need to be partnering, getting third-party validations. So partnering with academic institutions that are doing research in this area, theological institutions for the faith-driven lens, and then actually organizations that are trying to standardize impact metrics in different industries. And we bring the field experience and the knowledge sharing with other funders and our measurements. So this is aspirational. Obviously, we're still on a journey. I want to thank Steve Smith in particular for helping us through this process and this journey as well. We need help along the way, but we're so glad that we're in this together.
Yeah, Iris, thanks. And many of you, and I should say, I don't want to overlook on post-investment support and things like impact metrics. We've had many people come alongside our fund that are our investors and actually jump in and help one of our businesses. If you're interested in that and going a little deeper than just financial, we welcome that. That's we recognize the wisdom in the room, and in one way we've been able to be hugely blessed is through our investment committee. We're way too deep into this gathering to not have introduced our board and investment committee, but I said I have a slide on this, so let's just wait until we do that now. And because these folks have not only rolled up their sleeves and given us a tremendous amount of time, but their wisdom has really guided us and really, I think, saved us from making some big mistakes. At least three we brought deep into due diligence, which we don't love to do when we found things and we're challenged, and two or three all the way through the investment committee. I'm thinking of the solar panels. Harry was deeply involved in this one, and it was very hard. You get attached to these folks in due diligence. We learn not to become super attached in due diligence, because if you end up saying no, it's hard. But we did the right thing in those investments, and I think it really protected our portfolio thanks to our investment committee. So I'd like to introduce the chair of our investment committee, Hervé Sarteau. He's going to share a few thoughts about the learning journey and kind of what we do on the investment committee. So Hervé, if you want to come on up, you can, can we give Hervé a round of applause just because? And,
Thank you. Yeah, quite a journey. So I just want to recognize everybody on the committee. Lauren, obviously, who was here, and Dave told me he couldn't make it, and Dolly couldn't make it either. But it's a wonderful team. I think that when I was first approached, I think David called me, and then Peter called me back, I guess, 5 years ago or so, to join the board. And I knew them. I knew their hearts. I knew their brains. I knew where they were coming from, their faith, because we'd worked together at Opportunity over a number of years. And the first time they invited me to, and I said no. And I think at first that was before the thought of the funds, that it was more being structured like an investment club. And I felt that it was not necessarily the right fit for my skills. And then about 6 months later, it was like, now it's structured as a fund. This feels like this is right. And like I said, I knew their hearts, I knew their brain, I knew that their face right there. But I was like, boy, they're going to need some help, because launching a fund when you have no track record and where you have kind of a diverse set of background is not easy. So my background, I was with Carval Investors. I was one of the founding partners. Our first fund was $6.5 billion when we launched it back in 2006. So it was different targets. But the truth is that right away, you could see that they were so eager to learn and to capitalize very quickly on not just me, but a lot of other people that could join in and help. So the process for, like you said, for sourcing deals, for portfolio construction, for underwriting, is just, they've done a fabulous job of putting things together. And you've seen some of the flow that they're using. Very effective, very pointed, and I think there's still a journey, no question. But we're going through transactions, and we're killing them early when we need to. I tend to be the naysayer in the room. That's kind of my job. I'm pretty good at it, saying no, unfortunately. But I think on the impact that you raised, I think that's one of the things that's, to me, the whole impact investment industry is in complete infancy, because nobody today really think through or knows how to think through, well, what's the difference of impact between $1 in equity versus $1 in debt? How do we measure the difference? And for people who are for their own portfolio or wealth managers, how do we advise people to think through what does risk return means when it comes to impact? So there's a lot to do there, but we're trying, and I think we're making great progress. So thank you.
Right, thank you. Yeah. And Laura, do you want to stand up? Yeah. I recognize Lauren Elmore. She's been just instrumental on our board. And unfortunately, Dolly is the CFO for Oracle for all of Africa. Kenyan?
Embassy in Nairobi.
Yeah. Came out of P&G, Hewlett Packard, GE. I mean, she is an ace, and she's on our investment committee, and then Dave told me he ran Edgewater funds. I think 4 or 5 funds they've had, very successful out of Chicago. So we're blessed with these kind of thinkers on our investment committee and experience. And then I'd like to introduce our board chair, and we would not be here today if it wasn't for this board of advisors. They have been our gospel patrons. If you're familiar with that book, it's how we got paid the last 3-4 years. Quite honestly. And they're not asking for shares in the GP. They've just been really generously giving us startup capital. So I want to give a round of applause to the board, and Peter Thorington, if you want to share your thoughts on what you've learned and about the board. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, well, thank you. And I must say, just been inspiring listening to the people discussing this earlier. But in fact, the background actually goes back a little more than 5 years. And I got a call from David. David and I and a number of other people here have been involved, worked together for almost 20 years at Opportunity. So David is a person I knew, person of faith, a person in whom I had great confidence. They made this call, and he said, I think I'm going to do something on the impact investing side. Yours truly didn't really understand what that meant. So I said, yep, that's good. And what does it mean? And what resonated, he mentioned the word jobs. Now you'll have recognized already, I talk with a different accent from most of you. I was raised in South Africa. South Africa today would probably be one of the most sophisticated economies in Africa, and was one where there was pretty good full employment going way back in time. South Africa today has an unemployment rate in excess of 30%, and that would be one of the star performers within Africa. So when David mentioned jobs, that really resonated. Anyway, at the end of that call, I said, I'm in. I then have to talk to my wife and explain what we're in. and I also need to understand what's impact investing all about. But I think if we look at it, and I think Jerry earlier this morning mentioned vision, the one thing which hasn't changed from that first call from David, our vision is to create jobs. And we want to do that in a way that honors Christ. We want to be the feet and hands of Christ in the marketplace. Monique always reminds me we need to be the sweet aroma of Christ in all we do. So that basically, that vision has not changed. How we get there has been an evolving process, to say the least. But we have persevered, and I think that's the other thing that one learns through this board activity. It's one of perseverance. You don't give up when you meet the first roadblock. So if Eyrie says no the first time, you go back to him 6 months later, because of the kind of expertise that Eyrie brings, one of the best financial minds that I know, we need in this organization. So that's really where we started, and I must say the journey has been one of real joy. We have a great board, and we will certainly like to recognize them in due course. It's a diverse board. Many of us know each other very, very well, and that's good. But the important thing from that, and I think the same thing is true in terms of the investments that we make. We want to make sure that there is mission and faith alignment. That is really, really, really critical. Yes, on our investments, you also want to make sure that we have gone through the thing from a financial standpoint, and it's going to make sure that we generate the returns that will make this organization sustainable. So we do have a diverse board. And what is our role? John put up earlier the flywheel, and obviously we are really ones to say, right, are we going round this flywheel in an effective way, and are we going through all the various steps? And I'd say, in a sense, we're not there to make any decisions. We are there to encourage those people, and it's a small team who are doing the heavy lifting. We're not doing the heavy lifting. They're doing the heavy lifting. We have investments where people are also doing heavy lifting. Our thing is just to make sure we're following that process, and that we are encouragers to all. I think that's how we see our role. And I just wanted to raise one other thing. So jobs is really critical. Our goal in 5 years' time, and I think I'm right in saying this, David, is to create 250,000 jobs. However, the way that will be, those jobs will impact the marketplace will be many times that. Yesterday, Monique and I sat down. We had an opportunity to talk with Brian and Sharon McKenzie. Brian is the CEO of Contegra. Contegra is a process. Brian, I won't steal his thunder, but we probably have 100 sort of jobs at Contegra. However, that supports something between 7,000 and 10,000 chrysanthemum farmers. Now, in November last year, I was one of the group that went back to see all our various investments. And the people say, what was the highlight? The highlight, well, there were many highlights. The one highlight were 2 chrysanthemum farmers that we visited out where they're farming. And you could see the pride where they explained the house behind is something that had been built in the prior 2 years. Prior to that was something built with mud. This is now a house we would all be very, very happy to stay in. They pointed across to those farmers who hadn't got the message. They were still farming corn. Chrysanthemums survive in drought. There's been a drought. The corn guys were suffering. The chrysanthemum farmers were flourishing. Not only that, when they produce their dry flowers and take them to the marketplace, they get cash in return. Other people out there, it's the middleman that takes all the money. The poor farmer is basically almost abused and exploited as the process goes. So if we have a look at it, yes, it's jobs, but we actually want to raise the whole economy, and it's actually the community that is supported by those jobs and by those companies that really, I think, makes for the impact. I met with Ben Carlson a few minutes ago, and Ben is doing the same thing in coffee. So again, yes, we're employing a few hundred people in Longmiles Coffee, but we're supporting many thousands of coffee farmers who are now making a really living wage and producing high-grade coffee. So all I can say as a board, we bless the team that are out there. We bless each of you who are running those investments so effectively, and not only producing the return, but doing it for Christ. Thank you.
Peter, thank you so much. And I would like to have Kathy to stand. Kathy Drake, she's been on the board, and Herb Hess, you're just recently stepped down, but he was there for the first 4 years. I don't know if you want to stand or just wave a hand, Herb, but Herb was, yeah. And we always pray, do long devotionals to start off these board meetings. And I have a son who, with autism, that's struggled. And years later, Herb always asked me, "How's your son?" I'm praying for your son. This just shows the depth of the quality of these folks. They go way beyond the mechanics of the board and responsibility to caring for us as people. And it really empowers us to kind of not only with our own spiritual formation, but in the challenging times of what it takes to launch this kind of a fund. So we're going to have some Q&A here, and I'm going to kick it off with just asking Harry to share something I think that's really important that was missed. But I think if there's any thoughts on any of these slides, and I know we went through them fast, and you want to go deeper, now's the time to ask. And but we're going to actually make sure everyone gets each other's email addresses, unless you tell us you don't want that, and that's fine. But so please tell us if you don't want that, because many people have asked and saying, "I'm really enjoying these connections," and we'll share the presentations as well. So if you missed a slide, I see a lot of people taking pictures of slides. You'll get them afterwards. So Harry, really interesting. Harry pioneered this for us, really. We were having all these discussions, the investment committee, about portfolio construction. And, there's all kinds of ways to look at that. The obvious ways are kind of balance of risk and geography and sectors and those sort of things. We do care about that. But there's a whole bunch of other ways that became really apparent. So maybe you could just tell us the matrix that you constructed that we're now using, and tell us a little bit about that.
Thanks. And I remember that was supposed to be in my earlier bit, but good question. So we've had a look. So it's interesting. Eyrie said when we looked at the impact side of our investments, she showed the little diagram there that showed where they kind of fall. So as part of the portfolio construction, we thought actually it was a good idea to look at our companies across a series of components that allow us then to create a balanced portfolio. So actually the impact side is one of those components as an example. So we want to be long in direct job creators, but and so you saw that there was a significant weighting toward the direct job creators. That's deliberate. So we will do, companies that are in the job pioneering or in the job enabling, etc. But we'll do them slightly less. So when we look at the portfolio, we'll go, where are we? Have we got capacity to take in another job pioneer? As an example, there's another phrase we use that I heard used this morning. Actually, Greg used this. He said, "We're the tip of the spear." We look at companies from the perspective of, is this company tip of the spear, or are we going in supporting? And so what we mean by that is there are some companies where we're the first institutional investor they've ever had. And they don't have a full board structure, and they may not even have the depth of leadership team that would be desirable, but they're doing something extraordinary. And we look at that sort of company and go, this is going to take a lot more work from our team. We're going to spend a lot of time, and there's a lot of prayer and a lot of heartache in pulling that together. Other companies we've been invited into, we'll hear from Eileen from MoCo as an example, where other institutional investors have already got involved and they're doing the heavy lifting. They're in the board, they're doing a variety of things with that. And so that we're more like a spear carrier. We're not the tip of the spear. And so we want to weight our portfolio such that we can get involved, but we can't have a whole portfolio where we're the tip of the spear. We're too small a team to do that. And so we look at that. We look at currency. So anybody who's active in the currency markets will know that the Kenyan shilling has been challenged. So we have some businesses where their income is produced in export. And so they're a US dollar business, so that's okay. We can invest in those. We have some businesses that sell everything locally. We have two sitting beside each other. In fact, I think most of the businesses, Kentegra accepted, who are talking to us are mostly local currency businesses. So we have to have a balance of that, so we don't end up, too exposed in the case of currency failure. Those are the sorts of additional things that we look at. Ownership of the company. We try and get a balance of locally owned companies to companies that are owned by people who've come into the country to really transform lives. So we look across a whole sort of range, and we look at our portfolio and go, okay, we feel like we're getting a bit long in expat-owned companies. We'll look for really focus our portfolio attention on domestically owned, etc. So it's just another way of viewing the portfolio that's been really helpful, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. It's been a goal to always try and keep our portfolio as much as possible, at least 50% locally founded and locally run. And it's one of our big goals in the next 5 years is to get better at that. Actually, I would say one learning is that we're not great at that, and we want to be. That's a priority for us. And part of that is hiring a Kenyan vice president who we hope can grow into a partner and have a regional team that's kind of more indigenous than all of us. So many of us lived in Africa, but it's never the same as being a local. And we recognize that. So let's shift to some Q&A. Yeah, I think Eric's going to give you the mic.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
It's wonderful that you're investing in companies that create jobs, but I always think of efficiency as doing the most with as few people as possible. How do you balance those kind of things as you're thinking? I mean, if your company is to produce tilapia, you want it to get as much tilapia with as few jobs in order to be an efficient company. So,
yeah, Harris, go ahead.
I'm happy to talk about that. So we see certain global trends that are moving to Africa because of the young population in Africa. I mean, I think the statistic is something like by 2030, 1 out of every 2 people going into the workforce is going to be in Africa. And so you've got industries like the apparel industry that will always need labor, and agribusinesses and manufacturing that will always require thousands of people to do that work, and smallholder farmers. So those are the sectors that we focus on, especially when we look at that job creator category. You'll find a lot of them are in that are in those sectors, and those would be the ones that we would target.
If I could just jump in, so I wholeheartedly agree, and I think the African companies will be competitive on a global market basis if they are efficient. And some of us got the opportunity to walk through the manufacturing plant at Burn Manufacturing, which makes cook stoves, and it was absolutely world class. Laser cutting machines everywhere, whatever. It wasn't over labored, if that makes sense. It was super efficient. They still hire, I think they've got nearly 2,000 direct staff, as well as a big distribution network. So I think we aspire to be investing in companies that are doing things in a world-class way, and so some of them will absolutely mechanize big chunks of what they do, but even in that scenario, the sort of downstream impact of what they're doing will be very material.
Final thought is that we would never ask our businesses to add jobs that aren't necessary. We look at jobs as our measurement, but we don't ask them to say job creation and expansion. It has to be in alignment with their cash flow always. And we do identify in due diligence almost always talent gaps. And almost everyone underspends on a CFO. And, they have a junior level accountant capability. And it's understandable they're small growing companies, but we have to kind of have conversations about if you really want to be 5X, you need to do really good forward projections. You really need to understand your monthly cash flow. And we have lots of conversations like that. So it leads to a mutual understanding with them and us. And we try and really think of what's best for them and get them to say that's their decision, not ours. That's critical. But many times on an executive team on a small growing business, they have to get, like Contegra, it took a long time, but now they have a great human resource manual and policy. But up until that, they didn't. So that's the kind of thing where that creates a whole bunch of good jobs. And that's how we look at it. So, yeah.
There's another question.
Was there one closer? Ooh, there was one closer. All right, coming closer first.
Thanks. Well, I just want to commend you because I get excited when I hear about numbers of jobs. I get more excited, Iris, when I saw your concentric circles of how you're impacting an ecosystem. And then I get even more excited, and I think you guys should start taking credit for how you may transform impact investing in general, the whole faith-driven movement, but also capital markets of drawing capital to Africa and to other places that isn't even faith-based. We want you to have those superior returns unashamedly. Why? Not because, like you said, not because we need it back, but because we want other people to see that they can come here, do good while doing well. That's the magic of the market mechanism, the profit motive done in this way, is a kingdom way, is a good thing. We don't need to be ashamed of that. So I'm just really, really pleased to see that. I also want to commend you for being a learning organization. You've already shown that you started one way, you're looking at it and adding to your whole metrics and evidence and tracking. So thank you for that too.
Just, I want to follow that with what I think is going to be an unpopular opinion. I don't think there's a single one of our businesses that would see themselves in the top left bucket that Greg put on the slide. You're going to hear from a bunch of companies this afternoon that have aspirations to be absolutely in the top right segment. And I can tell you there are other groups of people, there are other groups of people who are around who recognize the opportunity. I spent 7 years living in Southeast Asia. Anybody who's invested in China in the 1980s will have had a hard time. But you look at it today and you understand why you were investing in China in the 1980s. Africa is like that now. And you know who is leading the way in investment in Africa is the Chinese. And if we want to have an influence in the culture, in the way that companies operate, then we want to be there because it's a tremendous business opportunity and it's a tremendous opportunity to set culture. So,
last question.
First of all, thanks so much for this panel and the previous panel and the great job you've been doing in explaining and laying everything out for us. It's very obvious that you're very selective when you see the number of 237 or 73, and you've chosen to invest in 12 or 13. My question is, as your assets under management continue to grow, how do you continue to expand that funnel to find those high quality, the companies that really fit what Talanton is trying to do?
Do you want me to say something first? Did you join too? Go ahead. Sure. Okay. Yeah. One thing that's super, I would say, fun about the continent of Africa is there is a endemic entrepreneurial culture. You know, I just heard the other day that of the 1.2 billion or whatever it is now, Africans, 80% are either starting a business, have started a business, trying to start a business. Of course, that includes microfinance, but it's also a huge emerging and established middle class, many of them what I would call underemployed, most of them. There's just not the opportunities to go land a job with a big company like you could find here. So they have to start something. So where Talanton excels, when we're not an early stage VC, that's just not what we're good at. It's not our game. We come along post-revenue, minimum of $500,000 in sales. And the idea is to identify those ones that have either tried once or twice. There's ones who, when they get up to $500,000 in sales, by the way, they've already learned a lot. That's pretty impressive already. It's our privilege and honor to come alongside them and put money in we view it as a horizontal relationship. But yeah, so on that subject, we partner with people who are doing accelerators. There's 2 faith-driven accelerators, training thousands of these smaller entrepreneurs, faith-driven organizations. We love that because that's needed. So, we know that we're not, getting all of the missing middle filled at Talanton, not even close. So our pipeline, we've had 3 or 4 or 6 introductions even the last 2 weeks. Yeah, our sourcing network now just keeps feeding us with more and more opportunities. And that hasn't been a major issue for us, finding those opportunities, and we don't expect it to be. One reason we love the evergreen structure for Fund 1 is that it's open-ended. And for us, that's very missional. If it was a closed-end fund, we'd have seasons of raising capital, putting it to work, harvesting, exiting. This way, we can continually invest open-ended because we don't think that's going to be an issue, finding more and more of those mid-sized scalable businesses that really need our capital.
Yeah, I guess what's this?
I'll just say too that I feel like these last 5 years it's just the beginning, and we've gotten faster and smarter and better at saying no and saying no quicker. And so it's been a huge learning curve for us, but I think that, coupled with getting, pipeline companies especially from co-investors, I think other funds that now know us and have co-invested in with us and know what we're about and can trust us, that coupled with kind of our ability to assess something faster is really important.
And one final comment on this. There's a lot of people running around Africa trying to build portfolio to raise a fund. And so so what they're doing is they're going and doing kind of a whole analysis on a company, but don't have any money to give them. Actually, companies know we're investing. They know we have a portfolio. We have some capacity to invest already, and that's a tremendous advantage. And we've kept the scope of our fund very narrow from a geographical perspective to date. We're just in a component of East Africa. And so, and we've been asking ourselves this sort of question, how long until we expand that to a little bit bigger? We're just stretching into looking at a company in Tanzania at the moment. It will be a first Tanzanian investment. But East Africa there's other opportunities even in East Africa before we think about alternative regions as well.
Eric, over to you. Yeah.
Okay, well, we could keep these questions going on all afternoon. I'm sorry, but we also need to eat. And so, Iris, would you actually pray for a meal? Microphones coming from everywhere.
Let's pray. Father God, thank you for these rich discussions, and thank you that you are faithful in our journeys, that you show up. Your fingerprints are everywhere, God, and that you direct our steps, Lord. I pray for the conversations that are happening. I pray that you would continue them during the meal that we're going to have, and I pray that you would bless the food for all of us. Thank you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Man, well, thank you guys so much. They're going to be around, so you can stop and ask them questions along the way in the hallways and the byways here at Glen Eyrie. So give them applause, though, for the great work.